Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy married with Yamato? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Those support to please enter name here for writing that awesome fanfic and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. Let's start this video. Monkey D. Garp stood at the bow of his marine warship. His most recent trip around the New World had been interesting, to say the least. Nothing had really shaken the now 67-year-old hero of the Marines. He continued to dominate rookie and veteran pirates alike without so much as breaking a sweat. Ever since that moronic rival of his went and got himself executed, he has been forced to clean up the mess that was this new age of pirates. And being the only Marine really capable of doing anything, sans the admirals, he became the de facto head of taking down New World pirates. He hated admitting it, but the man once known around the world as the king of the pirates was the only man who really made the job fun. Excluding a certain other man, that is. But he was dead, and so was Roger, and even his closest friend Sengoku had become a boring old man. Sure, he was the fleet admiral, but that didn't mean he shouldn't have rice cake parties and eat donuts with his old friend. Garp would have to harass him the next time he'd go to HQ with his most recent report. He'd get a kick out of making the calm and collected leader of the Marines scream his face red and maybe get him to have a drink or three. Speaking of his most recent report, Garp looked back towards the interior of the ship. He collected some potentially vital information while sailing, but he honestly wasn't sure what to do about it. He picked his nose and shrugged to himself, deciding that it was a later problem. He turned back forwards, staring out in the distance. A small island was finally coming into view and a big smile appeared on his face. It had been a week since his most recent incident and he was ready to return, even more a moment. As much as they were a pain in his ass, Garp missed those damn grandkids of his. Sure, one wasn't actually his blood, but who cares? The kid was tough as nails and soft at heart. He just hoped he could get the two of them thinking right for once. Pirates. You both plan to be pirates. What's wrong with that, Gramps? My father was a pirate, why can't I? Yeah, Grandpa. And I'm gonna be king of the pirates. What? That's it, the both of you are gonna get a taste of my fist of love and then I'm sending you into that bear cave. Garp smiled to himself. He was a good grandpa. On Island Goa Kingdom coast, Garp had docked the ship right outside of the Foosha village and was instantly greeted by the local barkeep Makino and the mayor Whoop Slap. Their conversation was uneventful, with a simple check-in on how his grandsons were doing, hoping that they finally smartened up and listened to him. Makino was a sweet girl and almost like a mother to his two grandkids, though she had a bad taste in men. Red hair, really? Guy was trouble, and Garp still grumbled about him giving that so-called dream of his to his grandson. Whoop Slap was a grumpy geezer, but always had a soft spot for the two kids. Turning back to the ship, he sensed something amiss, and a few moments later a scream was belted out from the deck. A Marine called out, requesting assistance, and he sighed. He hoped he wouldn't have to deal with this now, and maybe the higher-ups could handle it, but no. Now he had to make a decision. Monkeys weren't good at making that, including that damn son of his. Garp slowly made his way up the ramp, intently listening into the sudden rampage, and yells heard on deck. He focused in and sighed hard, knowing full well that the guest they were so unceremoniously being knocked out by was much more powerful than they were letting on, or maybe even realized. Great. More trouble. Upon reaching the deck, a Marine collapsed in front of him, and Garp picked his nose. His new adversary saw him and immediately came straight on, full sprint, probably intending to hit him. They were holding a blackened yet dulled massive mace, almost as big as them, and swung it wildly, intending to do some real damage. Garp simply held up one hand, caught them, and held his enemy in the air. Enough grip was used to hold them in place, but otherwise he wasn't planning on hurting them. He scratched his head and sighed again. I am Odin. Kazuki Odin. They screamed, as though this warrior call would cause Garp to crumble. Haha. Odin, huh? I fought the man, and I can tell you right now, you are not him. I can't seem to remember him being an 8-year-old girl. Garp continued his laughter, even as he was glared upon with the most utmost anger. I'm 9 and I am Kazuki Odin. You cannot laugh at me. I will be the one to destroy Kaido and free Wano. The girl retorted angrily. That's so? Well, I think you'll need to be much stronger than you are now if you even want to make it a challenge. Garp pointed back towards the ship at the many currently unconscious Marines. Some were foaming at the mouth, others had a lump on the head, courtesy of the girl in his massive hand. You did all that, huh? The girl shrugged, or at least attempted to, given the circumstance. Garp scratched the back of his head, trying to make a final decision. Well, he was already hiding a couple dirty secrets. What's the worst that could happen if he added another? And this feisty one might be another good recruit for the Navy. He'd get all three, even if it killed them. Listen here. I got some grandkids I've been taking care of, they could use a tough kid like you. They lost a brother, and having you around might cheer 'em up. How about you stick around, I help train you a bit, that way you can do my job for me and kill Kaido. I don't feel like working hard these days, and this means I don't have to file paperwork. He began heartily laughing to himself at the thought. One day he'd tell Sengoku what he did, if not just to laugh at his reaction. It'll be priceless. The little girl stared at him, confused. She was currently wearing a tiny white kimono, matching her bright white hair, and her tiny red horns poked out from the top of her head. She had no idea who he was or how he could help, but she also wasn't sure where she even was. Wait a minute, are we not in Wano? She all but cheered. Course not. This is the East Blue, possibly the farthest sea from Wano. The girl finally settled down in his massive hand and looked around in awe. No prison cell, no flower capital. Just a tiny village full of non-samurais. She yelled out in joy and fainted from excitement. When she finally awoke, she was lying in a bed of a small room. This was definitely not part of the ship. No smells of the ocean, no sailors cursing and no calls to man the positions, whatever that meant. She sat up and assessed her surroundings. For a 9-year-old girl, that meant look around and make sure no one was waiting in the shadows. Determining she was safe enough, she made her way downstairs to come upon a bar. A green-haired woman, no older than 21, was standing behind the table, cleaning up and organizing. She turned to see the little Oni and smiled. Hi there. My name's Makino. What's yours? The little girl stared blankly at the woman before her. She wasn't a massive spider or some physically strong warrior. She was just a tiny lady. I'm Kazuki Oden. She replied happily. Makino pouted ever so much before putting on another warm smile. Garp told me you'd say that, but that's not your real name, is it? Come on, you can tell me. The Oni hesitated. She was strong-willed and nearly wanted to yell out her hero again. But something in the smile and eyes of this woman told her that she might just be okay telling the truth. Yamato, she muttered, ever so quietly. What was that? You gotta speak up. Yamato. Yamato yelled out, with as much aggression as a 9-year-old could manage. My name is Yamato, she reiterated, and realizing her tone, quieted down. Well, Yamato, Garp is taking care of some business in town, unloading some cargo and talking to the mayor. But he wanted me to bring you over to a friend of ours' home in the woods to meet his grandkids. She smiled again and beckoned the girl forward. She left her hand out, hoping Yamato would take it. Yamato was tempted to just run away, maybe out into the woods of the island to find some food. She was asleep for quite some time, and she really needed food. Samurai weren't supposed to be hungry, but she still did. She had more training to do if she wanted to become Oden. Yamato turned back and ran back up the stairs, searching for her weapon, and sprinted back down, club in tow. She took the woman's hand with a big smile and followed her direction. Makino wasn't sure what to make of this tiny monster-like girl, but she was absolutely adorable. She just knew the boys would love her. A few minutes later, they had made their way to a forest clearing, which held a house, as well as some interesting add-ons to the side. 2 shacks stood side by side, one red Ace, the other in a much messier handwriting red Luffy. They hadn't been used in some time, but apparently had been hosting 2 individuals. The pair stopped in front of the door before Makino gave a quiet knock. A moment later the door swung open, and a massive woman with curly orange hair and a cigarette angrily appeared. Who the hell is it? The woman questioned. She seemed hell-bent on a fight until she recognized Makino. Oh, it's you, Makino. The boys aren't home right now, said they went hunting. Makino smiled before she properly introduced the 2. Dayton, this is Yamato. She'll be staying with us for a while, she warmly said. Dayton stared down at the little girl with a look of absolute confusion on her face. Not again. Dayton complained. She was finally getting used to 2 more mouths to feed, one of which ate all of their food. Bringing yet another child in, especially whatever this girl was, would just throw everything off again. Tell Garp I ain't raising another one of his idiotic grandkids. I'm Kazuki Oden. Yamato replied indignantly. She glared up at the older woman, ready to smack her with her club. This lady looked tough, but she'd faced much. Makino sighed, placing her hand on Yamato's head, ruffling her hair a little. But Dayton, look how cute she is. She's got nowhere else to go. She gave her patented puppy dog eyes to the mountain bandit, who tried her damnedest to ignore them. Just as they began to take effect, 3 monsters entered her peripheral. 2 kids and 1 old man. Dayton quickly slammed the door shut, hoping to avoid the inevitable clash. Too bad. The door busted back open, a fist laying in its wake. Garp had arrived on the scene, a wide smile playing on his face. Good to see you, Dayton. I got a present for you. Another kid. Her glare gave him all the response he needed, and he busted out laughing. Behind him, the 2 boys looked on in confusion. The older one had dark black hair and an orange shirt with a bandage over his eye. He held a pipe over his shoulder and a look of annoyance. The other boy carried his pipe on his back and was adorned by a straw hat much too large for his small head. He had a scar under his left eye and was sporting a few lumps. What was most interesting was the big smile he had upon seeing Yamato, whilst the other looked aggravated at the scene playing out. "We can't take any more of these monsters, Garp," Dayton yelled, grabbing a hold of his collar. "You've cursed us enough with these two, have you no shame?" Garp continued laughing, tears welling up at the corners of his eyes as he couldn't contain himself. Makino giggled, knowing full well the outcome before anything was even said. "It'll be fine. She's a good girl. Her dad is Kaido," he responded between laughs. He was instantly dropped, with Dayton's mouth now agape. The commotion drew the attention of other bandits inside, who, upon hearing the news, began packing bags intending to run away, Dayton included. "Where do you think you're going?" Garp asked. "Away from here. First you have me take Roger's kid. Then dragons. Now Kaido's no way, not gonna happen. I'll be killed." She was crying massive tears, praying to any gods that hurt her for a chance to escape with her life. Garp just laughed again. "You'll be fine. I'll be back in a couple weeks to train these brats anyways." He turned to the two boys and said, "Ace. Luffy. This is Yamato. She's staying with you now. Treat her well, or I'll beat you both bloody." He gave them his classic smile and showed them his fist, already ready to smack them. Ace blinked and turned away frowning. Luffy smiled a wide smile, excited at the prospect of a new friend. After what happened to his other brother, he needed someone to replace the void. "Hi, I'm Luffy. I'm gonna be king of the pirates," he exclaimed to her, walking her way with a hand out. The custom confused the girl, who readied her club to strike. This was getting more and more confusing as the moments went on. She had no context to anything, and these people added absolutely nothing to work with. By the time he reached her, she had fully tensed up, expecting an attack. None came. Luffy looked at her confused. "Don't wanna shake my hand." She looked at the hand in question, unsure what to do. She looked up at Makino, who smiled gently at her and motioned with her hand what she should do. Understanding drew on Yamato's face, and she whacked the boy full force with her club. Luffy was launched a good 20 yards away and smacked a tree. Everyone stared mouth agape except Garp, who couldn't stop laughing. What a great day this turned out to be. Luffy bounced off the tree and flew back nearly to where he was hit from. The biggest smile she'd ever seen graced his face as he said the following that was awesome. "You gotta join my crew, we can be pirates together. When I turn 17, I'm gonna go out to sea. Wanna be my first mate?" "Ace told me no, so you can be it instead." His bombardment of questions and excitement frazzled her. "Hey brat, how many times have I told you? You're not gonna be a pirate." Luffy stuck his tongue out at Garp. "Says you. That's it, it's time for my fist of love." Garp swung downwards at the boy, causing him to yelp and leaving a sizable lump on his head. He walked over to Ace as well and gave him the same treatment. "Ow. What did I do?" Ace questioned angrily while rubbing his head. "Nothing. Just felt like it," Garp replied, smiling. He was always smiling. A frowning Garp meant trouble, and Yamato could tell that easily. If her swing couldn't hurt the boy and his simple punch laid him out, she was worried he might actually be stronger than her father. Hopefully he didn't have the same attitude. Luffy was back up and smiling again. "Well, what do you think? Wanna flip the world upside down with me? It's gonna be a blast." Yamato looked at the boy up and down and knew in that moment there was something about him you just couldn't help but adore. You couldn't say no to him. His smile was too infectious, and the gleam in his eyes made you know he would stop at nothing in search of his dream. She never really had anyone who called her friend. Sure, Kaido had servants, and there were those adopted kids he was raising, but she was otherwise alone. Especially after deciding to be Odin. And yet this boy looked at her with anticipation, excited just at the prospect of being her friend. So she did the one thing that made sense. "Yes," she exclaimed. "But we gotta beat my dad up too." "Hey. Works for me," Luffy replied, happy to have his very first crewmate. His very first nakama. "This is awesome." He called to the heavens, looking up to the sky with a somehow even larger smile than he previously wore. Yamato smiled at that moment, fully and completely happy. Everyone sans Garp and Makino looked on in surprise and or terror. And the world would be forever shaken by this moment. The villagers had come together to send the pair off. The townspeople cheered and waved, excited to see them chase their dreams in this great pirate era. A local man offered them a dinghy, which was happily accepted as their first boat. Luffy and Yamato had filled it with a couple barrels of supplies, as well as a box of gear and clothes. It had been 3 years since Ace had left, and in that time the two continued their growth and grew even stronger. Luffy was now 17 and had developed quite the reputation as a local legend, defeating and consuming countless beasts that roamed the forest. His punches could smash rock to rubble, and he had unknowingly begun development into the next stage of physical power. But that would come later. For now, the rubber lad had a big smile adorning his face, wearing his casual red button-up tank top and shorts with a pair of sandals to boot. He was the most picture-perfect mild-mannered boy, not the rough and tough pirate most would expect. His partner however was quite the sight. Since her training began with Garp, if one could call being beaten and thrown into the woods to be attacked by wild animals training, she had become a near-equal powerhouse herself. Moreso if you asked her, something which had yet to be settled. Unlike Luffy however, her genes resulted in quite the growth spurt. Standing a good 2 feet taller than her captain, the 18-year-old was quite the image. She continued her tradition of wearing traditional Wano garb, with a white tunic-style top and red knee-length skirt. Her horns were now almost a foot long and bright red, sticking out from her snow-white hair, lightly colored at the tips with some turquoise lighting. The kimono has helped her dyed, and it was now a standard look for her. Unlike her counterpart, she had a weapon, wielding a large black club, a bigger version of the one she held when she came to the island. The two had been counting down the days until Luffy's birthday, with Yamato threatening to leave on her own adventure for almost a year. "You're lucky I'm sticking around for you," she'd remind him, all smiles. "A Youngjin like you could never make it out there without someone wise like me," she'd sarcastically remark. "You're just as dumb as me shishi," was almost always the response, to which Luffy would be smacked on the head. It was true though, Yamato was not what many would call smart. She was prone to getting lost and acting without thinking, probably because of who she ended up growing up with. Neither Ace nor Luffy could be considered tactical. But what they didn't have in brains they had in unending tenacity and heart. Their goodbyes were short and sweet, with a hug to Makino and a promise to pair her back with their joint treasure tab. Mayor Whoop Slap looked angry as all hell, making the moment all the more natural. One day they would be back, they promised. As they began their journey to the wide world and endless ocean, the Lord of the Coast finally made his appearance. A massive sea monster, with blood-red eyes bared his jaws of sharp teeth. "Whoa!" Luffy exclaimed. "It's you. Sorry I have to do this, but I've been perfecting this move since the last time we met." He wound back his arm, just as the monster closed in. "Gum pistol," he declared, smashing the monster clean in the cheek. His eyes bulged and his lower jaw seemed to bust as he was launched a good 100 feet away. "That's what you get, you stupid fish," Luffy called, sticking his tongue out in mockery. Turning to Yamato, he cheekily said 10 shishi. "That's not fair." "I let you have that one," she retorted annoyed. "I coulda hit him harder and farther." Yeah, sure. "Whatever you say Odin," he teased. During their years with Ace, Yamato and Luffy had bonded deeply, mostly because they couldn't beat him. Well, at least Luffy couldn't. Yamato won once and permanently held it over his head. "Yes, I'm stronger than Luffy, right Ace?" "That's not true. You just got lucky. He fought me right before. I weakened him up." "Right Ace. Would you two both shut up? Both of you are weak, I'm the only strong one here." That was 5 years ago. In 7 years, the two collectively won one time against Ace. Granted he left 3 years ago, but still. Other than that, the two really did share much in common, especially a deep excitement for adventure and the Grand Line. After the first few months, the two were thick as thieves, intent on causing trouble out in the world one day. Both could not wait until the moment they could hit the seas together, form a crew, see the world, kill her dad. All fun stuff. Speaking of Kaido, no word ever went around regarding his missing daughter. They assumed it must have been that he thought he finally killed her, accidentally or not. She had told the two brothers of her past, and they theirs. She was the daughter of Kaido, one of the 4 emperors. He was a terrible man who killed hundreds without a care in the world. And he killed her hero. When he had learned of her desire to be like Odin, he starved her for 20 days. This was followed by beatings, which she fought back on but couldn't even scratch him. Her last day on Wano, he had smacked her with his club, sending her flying from the island of his base. Quite a ways, actually, as she fell completely outside of Wano's borders. Fate would give her driftwood, but she passed out from the hit. She woke up on Garp's ship, and here she was. Finding out Ace was the son of Roger left her starstruck. She had read much of Odin's travels before her departure from the island, but did not have it on her when she was found. Roger was one of her heroes, but she kept that to herself after the dirty look Ace gave her when she asked about him. He wouldn't expand too much, just that he was taken in by Garp and lived here his whole life from what he remembers. Didn't know his mom either. They even informed her of their late brother Sabo, which left her crying a whole day. She never met the guy, but he sounded so cool. She instantly hated those damn celestial dragons and would remember them later. She'd kick their asses too. Yamato dropped some of the Odin name as the years went on. She still believed wholeheartedly that she could be him, not just like him, but she also knew that she was not yet worthy of the name. Playing pretend and being the great man were two separate things. Instead, she had decided that her identity to those unknown to her would be Odin, and those clothes could call her by her true name. This would mean she'd still be both. Luffy thought that was dumb, but Ace understood. He struggled with his own identity, so he could sympathize with someone like her, who was just trying to find herself. "One day guys, I'm gonna beat my dad," Yamato had said. "And then I'm gonna free an open Wano, just like Odin wanted." "Then what?" Ace had asked. "You gonna stay there after?" "No, I just want to finish his last wish. Then, I might not have to be him anymore." "Shishi, guess we gotta beat him quick then. Don't wanna confuse everyone when I'm the Pirate King sailing with Kazuki Odin, that wouldn't make sense." Yamato smiled at the thought. Ace would leave Foosha when he turned 17 and they hadn't heard from him since. They all planned to meet again, with the promise they would all be great pirates. Now, in the present, the two looked out at the ocean, wondering what adventure lay ahead of them. "I think we need another 10 Nakama," he decided. 10? That's it. How are we supposed to do anything with 12 people? Yamato questioned. "It'll be fine. We just need some tough people, that's all." "Whatever you say, Captain, though as your first mate I should remind you we have no idea how to sail. We'll be Ian. And who said you could be my first mate? You should be a cabin girl." "You did," she deadpanned. She'd smack him later for the second comment, but she was honestly just happy to be out on the water. Fine, you can be my first mate," he sighed. Shishi. About a day later they were already out of food. "Yamato, I'm hungry," Luffy whined, tongue hanging out of his mouth. "Ugh. Shut up. You ate everything we had left," she responded, exasperated. "Nah. You did too. You eat like me." "Nope." "Yep." They sat in companionable silence until they felt the boat begin to sway. They looked around and almost out of nowhere, a massive whirlpool had formed. "Huh. That's cool," Luffy stated aloud. "What do we do?" His nonchalance passed onto Yamato. "Don't know. Die maybe." That would suck." Luffy looked around and came up with an idea or something. "Ooh, I can go in this barrel." He quickly scrambled in and closed the top. "What do I do?" she asked, annoyed. Luffy peeked his head out and pointed, "You might fit in that box." Yamato shrugged and emptied it out. This should have been more concerning for her, given that she was quickly being swallowed by a whirlpool and had devil fruit powers. But she didn't really recognize the danger and simply did as her captain commanded, just in time. Whirlpool 1, boat 0. The sound of splashing woke Yamato up. She was currently floating, of that she was sure, but wasn't sure what to make of it. Something smacked her box and she heard someone call out to pull. They loudly grunted, yanking the box onto something. She didn't move, figuring she'd play this out. She heard one grumble, "We should get that barrel too. Could have some good booze in it." "Hurry up," another noted. "She'll be back soon and we don't want to make her mad." "Shut up you," a third stated. "We just gotta pull this bad boy in, drag these downstairs and see what we got. Booze we drink, jewels we hide. Alvida'll have your hide if she catches you with money. She'll never know." "Got it," the first man exclaimed. "Help me drag this in, it's not as heavy as the first." For some reason, this comment stung Yamato, though she wasn't sure why. She heard them hoist it up and kick it back down what sounded like stairs. Hopefully that was Luffy, otherwise she would kill that rubber moron. "You're not allowed to die this early, damn it." She was finally dropped to a halt. The first man, who seemed to be in charge, said, "Hey Kobe, what are you doing down here?" The timid voice replied, "And nothing. Just looking around for loot." "In the kitchen, huh? Sounds suspicious." Well, what do you have there?" The third man from early replied, "Let's find out." "You're not gonna tell Alvida, right? We'd have a problem if you did." "Of course not." Kobe exclaimed. "Good, now let's see what's in this barrel." A moment later, a smash could be heard. "I slept so good," Luffy exclaimed. Figuring now was the time, Yamato emerged from her own box, stretching out as she did so. "Time to fight." The two looked at the three in front of them in confusion, they must have been pirates. The pirates seemed downright horrified before they drew swords. "Who are you, kid?" one pointed out, wearing striped attire. "And what the hell is that?" he exclaimed, realizing Yamato wasn't what you might call human. Luffy looked where his eyes were and began laughing hysterically. He pointed at her and said, "Yeah, what is that?" "Looks stupid to me, shush." Yamato growled before pulling her club for her back and swinging it fiercely. It seemed to almost pull the air, tightening it and sending it forwards, smashing the four in front of her. The three pirates went flying at the wall, Luffy smacked into the stairs. "Ow, Yamato. What was that for?" he replied, annoyed. He was rubbing his head, somehow her hits hurt him like Garp and Ace's. It wasn't fair she could do that too. "You know what," she huffed. "Shush, that's true, guess those guys are blind." Getting up, Luffy dusted himself off and noticed a terrified boy with pink hair crouched over. What are you two?" he hesitantly asked. "Pirates." Luffy replied cheerily. "Pirates? You aren't bounty hunters?" "No, who wants to be a bounty hunter? I just thought you could have been that wandering pirate hunter, Zoro." "Who?" Before Kobe could reply, Luffy cut him off. "I smell food." He brushed past Kobe, Yamato and To and opened the pantry. The two instantly attacked anything edible and maybe not edible and opened up the fridges to clear those as well. With a mouth full of food, Yamato asked, "Where are we? Is this a pirate ship?" Kobe looked at them absolutely confused. "No. This is a cruise liner." "Anyways, how did you beat those guys so easily?" "Strong, I guess." Yamato replied. "Though they seemed weak." Turning to Luffy, 3-1 by the way. "Those don't count." "Yeah they do." "Nah. Yeah huh." The two began butting heads, glaring each other down and growling. And just like that, a switch was flipped and they began laughing heartily. "Who are you two?" Kobe asked again. "Pirates, I told you dummy," Luffy replied, smacking his head. "My name is Monkey D. Luffy. I'm gonna find the One Piece and be king of the pirates," he declared excitedly. "Oh, and this is Yamato. She's my first mate." Yamato smiled widely, happy Luffy said it properly to him. "King of the pirates? That's impossible. There are thousands of strong pirates out there looking for the One Piece," and in the middle of his long-winded whine, Luffy smacked him again. "Ow. What was that for?" "Felt like it." Kobe looked at the two again and realized for one was like some type of actual demon, which was a little jarring, and two, they were serious. Absolutely serious. The smile on Luffy's face may have made it seem light, but the look in his eye said it all. He would be king. The two began walking away, leaving the pink-haired boy to his thoughts. "Wait." He called to them. They turned and waited. "Do you think if I try hard enough, I could find my dream as well?" "Sure. Why not?" "What's your dream?" Yamato asked. "I want to be a marine and catch bad guys and pirates. I'll be the greatest marine ever." "So, you'll be catching us huh?" Luffy asked, before giggling. "And no. I meant bad pirates." "You guys seem nice." They turned around and went back towards the stairs to the deck. "Wait a minute, where are you two going?" "Up," Luffy replied, pointing in said direction. "We need a ship, gonna see if they have one to take." Yamato nodded her agreement. Reaching the top deck, they came upon a band of pirates, currently prepping loot to be loaded onto an adjacent ugly ship. The larger-than-average woman, but still much shorter than Yamato, stared at them before yelling, "Who are you brats? What do you want? Where are the three I saw head down there?" "Too many questions," Yamato replied, picking her ear and semi-spacing out. "You brat. Get them men. They could be bounty hunters like Zoro." She pointed forwards, commanding her men to attack. Luffy and Yamato had a quick rock paper scissors, and Luffy won. Smiling, he stretched out his arm forwards to the mainmast, while Yamato grumbled about how he was cheating and that paper shouldn't beat rock. "Rock smash paper, how does paper win?" The men screamed in horror, having never seen a devil fruit in their lives. They were a rarity in East Blue. While they were frozen, astonished, Luffy called out, "Gum Gum Whip." He was yanked forwards and sent his leg in an arc, smashing every man in sight. He turned around and called 11-3. Yamato was not happy. "You'll pray for that brat." The woman looked towards the stairs, at the same moment Kobe appeared. "Kobe? Who's the most beautiful woman on these seas?" "That would be you, Captain Al." "Hey Kobe." Luffy interrupted. "Who's that fat hag?" Life paused for just a moment. The anger radiating off the woman was palpable. She finally raised her weapon, a massive club, but still smaller than Yamato's. Kobe looked terrified. Luffy looked confused. Yamato may or may not have picked her nose, depending on who was asked. She noticed some movement from the other ship in her peripheral. An orange-haired girl could be seen launching a great kick into a man's balls and snuck into the hulk of the ship after. Yamato smirked and refocused on the event in front of her. "Luffy? You don't understand, that's Iron Mace Alvida, she's the realization dawned on Kobe's face. Luffy didn't care about how strong she was. His conviction meant that he would go through anything that may try to stop him. In that moment, Kobe felt a wave of confidence upon him. She's the fattest, ugliest hag in the East Blue. The long moment passed once again, and not a sound was made. Ahahahaha. Luffy laughed finally, mouth wide open as he did so. "That was great Kobe. She's pissed." Alvida seemed to have enough of their nonsense. She rushed forwards, mace drawn over her shoulder. Kobe was frozen in shock, and Luffy stepped in to block her strike. With his head. A moment after contact, Luffy began giggling. "That won't work on me. I'm rubber." He threw his arm back a few yards. "Now Gum Gum." Right as he sent his arm forwards, a white blur appeared ahead of him, arms drawn back in a similar manner. But the swing that followed sent the woman in front of him miles away. Luffy's momentum carried him with no target to hit, and he careened into the lip of the ship, creating a nice hole. Yamato laughed at him. "That's 11-5. She counts as 2 since she's a captain." Luffy emerged from his hole and glared at her. "That's not fair," he grumbled. "I'm supposed to be the one to beat these guys. You're stealing my knockouts. Gonna have to be quicker than that. Besides, you got all those easy ones too." Before their argument could continue, they noticed 3 Navy ships moving in on their location. "Looks like it's time to go." Yamato called out, heading for the port where some spare dinghies were located. Luffy and Kobe followed behind. The Navy was now firing on Alvida's ship and the splashes were drawing ever nearer to their location. The trio got in a boat and dropped it to the waiting ocean below. Amidst the landing, Luffy made eye contact with another girl. She was also in a dinghy, looking to make a getaway. She seemed surprised at the current development and seeing the massive Oni was downright in awe. The distraction left her open and a cannonball began its descent right at her. Luffy, seeing her stunned moment, quickly jumped to her aid, sending the ball careening back towards the Navy ships. The girl was now even more dumbfounded as Luffy landed in her boat, hand in his hat, back to her. He turned and smiled his widest smile. "You okay?" She looked at the boy in front of her in confusion, and before she could respond, she was gifted the sight of Yamato leaping upwards and sending another ball back. "We gotta go," she called out. Luffy jumped back to their ship and waved to her. "Hope we meet again," he called out as they caught wind. Nami blinked before also adjusting her heading. She saw them sailing away, his arm up and waving excitedly. The other girl bonked him and said something before he made to turn away. He gave her one last smile and began rowing. Whoever those two were, she prayed she'd never see them again. They seemed like trouble and she didn't need trouble. Not all prayers are answered, however. 20 minutes later, the group had finally made enough distance as to not be followed. Luffy had gotten an earful of dissatisfaction for wasting time, but he laughed it off. "So Kobe, where is that pirate hunter guy everyone keeps bringing up? Zoro? I heard he was in Shell's town." "Why? Can you get us there? Please don't tell me you plan on meeting him, right?" Kobe complained, staring at the two. Their blank look said it all. "I guess there's a marine base there, so maybe we should go. It's not far off from here." "Perfect," Luffy replied happily. "Let's go." A few hours later, the trio made landfall at Shell's town, a small, simple island with a bustling town and massive marine base looming over top. They disembarked and instantly eyes were on them. Though Luffy and Yamato had no clue as to why. "Glad we made it," Luffy proclaimed. As they began walking the crisscross streets, he turned to Kobe and asked, "So where can we find this Zoro guy?" Instantly, the entire town's mood shifted, with some people leaping backwards in horror. "Guess he really must be a bad guy," Kobe decided. "We should find that marine base. I heard their commanding officer is a man known as Axe-Hand Morgan." Once again, the town seemed flabbergasted and began scattering away. This drew a hearty laugh from both Luffy and Yamato, and confusion was etched on Kobe's face. "This town is hilarious." Luffy laughed. "I understand fearing Zoro, but Morgan? That's strange." As they continued on, Kobe pointed forwards. "Looks like we found the base." The three stood at the entrance to the largest building Luffy or Kobe had ever seen. Yamato was not fazed, her home was about 50x the size after all. The marine base was a large cylinder, painted with blue and white stripes. The Navy coat of arms hung over the entryway, and looking up, movement could be seen on the roof. The outer area was massive, with training grounds to one side of the base, commanding a sizable portion of land. The complex was surrounded by walls two on all sides, with gates on the interior leading between the training grounds and the main base. Climbing a small exterior wall, Luffy gazed around until his eyes spotted a cross in the courtyard. A man appeared to be strapped to it, arms tied and legs hanging loosely. A black bandana covered his eyes, and he wore a white tee with green pants and some kind of light green sash around his waist. From just looking at him, he seemed dead to the world, but the sheer aura of power emanating off of him told otherwise. "That's Zoro?" Yamato asked. "Guy looks weak if you ask me." Luffy meant to reply, but at that moment, a little girl appeared to their right on a small adder, scampered up it, and ran towards the man. He seemed to recognize her and yelled something, but the smile on her face told them she was not afraid. She opened up a small cloth, revealing 2 rice balls, and offered them up. She intended to feed him, but as he argued, 3 new people appeared from behind the interior gate. 2 were simple marines, nothing individually interesting or significant. Just standard white garb with hats shading their eyes. The man who led them, however, was another case entirely. He had bright blonde hair, cut in the ugliest bowl, with a flashy purple suit and sharp white dress shoes. His ensemble was complemented by his deep butt chin and smug face, full of amusement. An argument ensued, with the blonde stealing a rice ball, stomping the other, and finally resulting in the little girl being grabbed and tossed over the wall. Luffy reached out and grabbed her midair, letting her fall safely on his chest. Yamato prepared to jump in right then, but Luffy sent his arm out and held her back. "What the hell, Luffy? I want to kick his ass." Luffy stared at her, before replying, "We will." "Not yet though, gotta talk to that guy first." Kobe rushed over to check on the girl, while Luffy made his way back over and leaped into the open yard, Yamato in tow. Zoro looked up, confused at the pair. "Who the hell are you two supposed to be?" "Pirates," Yamato replied happily. "The captain here is looking for a crew," she said, pointing to said captain. Luffy waved his hand to emphasize. "Pirates huh? You do know who I am, right? If you mess with me, I'll kill you where you stand." Luffy couldn't contain his excitement or his laughter. Shishy. "How are you gonna kill us when you're all tied up? How'd you get here anyways? Does it matter?" Zoro replied gruffly. "I have an agreement with that snot-nosed blonde guy Helmeppo. I've been up here 9 days and have 21 more to go. That chum promised to let me go after 1 month. A whole month?" Luffy exclaimed. "I couldn't last a day without food. And that's why you're weak, unlike me. My will keeps me going." "Blah blah blah, I'm so tough," Yamato mocked. "We can let you down, just join our crew." Zoro stared at her, one part angry, the other confused. "You think I'd sink that low? No thanks. What makes you think I'd even join you if you let me down? And what the hell are you anyways, lady?" "Hazuki Oden," she replied proudly, pointing a thumb to her chest. She was promptly bonked by Luffy on the head. "Don't lie to our future Nakama Yamato," Luffy joked. Turning back to Zoro, he said, "She's just a dumb monster, don't worry about her." She clubbed him for that. This led to a full-blown fist versus club fight, lasting a good minute. "You two done with your comedy routine yet?" Zoro asked, annoyed. They looked at him confused, her yanking on his cheek and his fist on hers. "If you are, then scram. I have more important things to worry about. If I can't even survive this, then I don't even deserve to pursue my dream." "What's that?" Luffy asked. "You going for the record for longest time without eating?" "No, you moron," Zoro yelled. "Just get out of here." The two shrugged and made to leave before Zoro called out again. "Wait. Toss me that rice ball." Luffy reached down and picked up what was left of the stomped food, now a pile of dirt and rice. It's just mud. "I don't care, just give it to me." Luffy shrugged and tossed the food into Zoro's open mouth. The man chewed and swallowed the stuff before stating just above a whisper, "Tell the girl, the food was delicious." Luffy and Yamato sat at a local restaurant, watching as Kobe checked to make sure the girl, Rika, had no lasting damage from the throw. She didn't seem to care, having a big smile on her face. "He really ate it all?" she asked happily. "Every last crumb. Seemed to like it too," Luffy replied. "I'm so glad. Is he really as bad a guy as everyone says?" Kobe asked. "No way," Rika exclaimed. "Everyone's afraid of him, but he didn't do anything wrong. That Captain Morgan's son, Helmeppo, had a mean wolf. He came into our restaurant sniffing for food and tried to attack me. Big bro Zoro saved me. So that's why he's in prison huh?" Luffy asked. She nodded, some tears in her eyes at the memory. "Captain Morgan and his son are the bad guys," Rika exclaimed. "They've been putting people to death for no reason and making everyone pay just to survive. Everyone is afraid of them." At that moment, Helmeppo entered the joint, big smile on his face. "Everyone out of my way," he proclaimed. "And bow those heads further. I'm the son of Captain Morgan, I'll have you know. Do you want to be jailed like that loser Zoro?" He began to laugh as he sat down and said, "We'll be executing him in 3 days. He'll be an example to the rest of you." Luffy looked at him in confusion. "I thought you made him a promise." "Where'd you hear that?" Helmeppo laughed again. "He's a stupid moron for believing me anyways." Luffy was up just like that. The swing he sent Helmeppo's way may have broken his jaw had he aimed a little lower. Instead, he got the side of his face and the man went flying out the door. His marine entourage made a feeble attempt to stop Luffy, only to be slammed into a wall on the other side of the street by Yamato. "Don't you dare move," she growled, now looming over them. The townsfolk were on the scene in an instant. "He actually did it," one man exclaimed. "He punched the captain's son," another announced, horrified. Kobe pulled Luffy back, trying his hardest to make sure the rubber boy didn't kill Helmeppo there and then. "Don't do it, Luffy. Are you trying to pick a fight with the Marines? He's scum. Who cares who he thinks he is? I'll kick his ass. I'm telling my daddy," Helmeppo cried. He staggered up and made to run and took a club to the rear end, launching him straight towards the Marine base. "Maybe that'll get him there faster." "I want to kick these guys' ass," Yamato said angrily. "I've decided," Luffy began. "Zoro will be joining my crew." The two rushed back to the Marine base grounds, intent on releasing Zoro. Kobe followed as fast as his stubby legs could take him, but was far behind by the time the pair reached the execution area. Zoro looked up, confused at the development. "I thought I told you two to go away. I'm fine on my own." "Nah. That helmet guy said he was gonna execute you in 3 days. So I punched him in the face," Luffy replied nonchalantly. Yamato nodded. "I smacked him right back here." "That's what that noise was?" Zoro asked. They all looked towards the entrance, which had a Helmeppo-shaped dent above the door where the Navy symbol had been. The man, boy, in question was gone. Suddenly it clicked for Zoro. "Wait, they're gonna execute me?" "Yep. So unless you join my crew, you're gonna die for sure." Zoro stared at him for a moment before smiling a wicked smile. What are you, the devil? And this your demoness? Luffy liked the sound of that. Close. So, are you in? Do I have a choice? Zoro gave them both a once over again and weighed his options. If I'm to join you, you better not get in my way. I have a dream and a promise to keep. You gonna tell us what that is now? Yamato asked. To be the world's greatest swordsman. The world's greatest swordsman, huh? The king of the pirates would have nothing less. Otherwise you'd make me look weak, Luffy replied, smiling. Zoro's eyes sparked at the audacity of the kid and his newly revealed dream. He smiled again, this one much lighter. Works for me, but I need my swords back. That asshole Helmeppo took them from me after I was tied up. Okay. I'll go get them. Yamato, you and Kobe get him down, I'll be right back. At that moment, a panting Kobe finally arrived, sweat on his brow and tongue out. That's not fair. I wanna fight people too. Yamato complained. Luffy laughed again, before grabbing a hold of the cross. Just wait, we'll still need to fight after this. Yamato smiled happily at that. Zoro looked at Luffy in confusion. What are you? Before he could finish, Luffy stepped back, stretching his arms, before launching himself at the roof. What the hell was that? Devil fruit, duh. Yamato replied. Her eyes seemed to sparkle before she asked, wanna see mine? Luffy landed on what could be considered an eyesore of a statue. Marines were currently in the process of lifting it up under the command of a guy with an iron lower jaw and an axe for a hand. He was yelling something Luffy didn't care about, and just as he prepared to attack, Helmeppo appeared in the stairway. That's him, daddy. That's the guy that hit me. There you are. Luffy yelled happily. I was looking for you. He leapt off, causing the whole statue to shudder and crack. The Marines looked horrified at his actions, but Luffy didn't care. Come on. You gotta bring me to Zoro's swords. He grabbed Helmeppo and dragged him behind, down the stairs into a hallway. Luffy began running every which way, not really sure what to do, but figuring he'd find them eventually. He came to a stop when he saw a certain orange-haired girl slip into a room with a captain sign over it. He scratched his head and shrugged, figuring it wasn't important just now. He suddenly remembered he was dragging the captain's son. So where are the swords? He turned to ask. Helmeppo struggled to raise his arm before pointing at the room adjacent to the captain's. He collapsed soon after. Luffy busted in and looked around, dropping Helmeppo unceremoniously on the ground. A few swords stood against a window. Luffy didn't know which was Zoro's, so he grabbed them all and tied them to his back. Looking out the window, he noticed a passed-out Kobe, a confused Yamato and an open-mouthed Zoro, standing together. He was freed, but was dumbfounded. Luffy smirked before grabbing the windowsill and pulling back. Launching downwards, Luffy landed directly in front of the three, smile on his face. He quickly removed the swords from his back and handed them off to Zoro. Wasn't sure which one was yours. Zoro finally closed his mouth and looked at Luffy like he had two heads. Now I'm even more confused. What the hell is she? Yamato? Did you show off again? No. Kobe was taking too long to untie the rope, so I, ripped them off. With my teeth. She smiled sheepishly. Why didn't you rip them off by hand? You got to show off your powers, why can't I? Cause now he's confused. That's not my fault. You confused him too. And look what you did, poor Kobe was freaked out too. Shame on you. But, shush. Sorry Zoro, she gets too excited sometimes. She's a dinner wolf. A divine wolf. I'm mythical. And I'm rubber, so what? She smacked him and he bounced back up. See? My power is cooler. Nah, not this again, Zoro cut in. Just hand me the swords, I use 3-sword style. Both of you shut up, it's giving me a headache. Wanna fight Zoro? Bet I could kick your ass. Yamato exclaimed. Quite. All of you? A voice boomed from across the field. It was that axe guy again. I don't care who you are, but you have defied my authority. For that, you will be executed. Men. Take aim and shoot them down. The Marines timidly raised their weapons and fired. Luffy simply stood in front of the group and took every shot. Bullets pushed his body inwards, but never pierced. You can have these back. Luffy yelled, before pushing his body forwards. The ammo went careening in all directions, just missing Morgan's head. If guns don't work, then slice them down. The Marines drew their sabers and rushed forwards. Just as they came close, a green blur slid in front of them, blocking their path and their blows. Zoro sat crouched, swords in his hands and jaw, blocking every single sword. Anyone so much as moves, they die. The Marines began to openly weep, unsure what to do. A man blocked their bullets, another their swords. And the psycho behind them would kill them if they didn't fight. Listen Luffy. I will join your crew. But never forget, my dream comes before you. So if you ever get in my way or stop me, I'll cut you down. Sounds good to me, Luffy said, smiling. I expect great things from you. Zoro smirked. "Wanna get these guys off of me, Captain?" Luffy smiled and prepared to whip his leg. Gum gum wh. Yet again, he was cut off, this time via hand pressing his head down from above. He fell forwards, face planting in the dirt. A white wolf monster demon thing used his body as a springboard and rushed forwards, slamming its club right through the line of marines. 11-11 now, Captain. Yamato turned back, a smirk playing on her white face. Luffy was fuming now. "That's not fair. I'm supposed to show off." Turning to Morgan, he yelled out, "Sorry about this, but I'm not gonna lose to her." He sprang forward, leaving his arm in the dust. "Now. Gum gum pistol." Morgan didn't even have time to react, let alone block. The blow struck stomach and sent Morgan to his knees, a smattering of blood escaping his mouth. He went down instantly, out cold. The gut shot probably left at least 2 or 3 ribs broken. There, now it's 13-11. Luffy stuck his tongue out in mockery. "What did you do to my daddy?" A voice called from behind them. The three turned to see Helmeppo holding a gun pointed to Kobe, who still lay unconscious. "Don't move or I'll shoot." Zoro sighed and slowly walked up to the coward. The only thought in his head being, what did I get myself into? "Don't come any closer." "I mean it, I'll shoot." He didn't finish his sentence. Zoro simply bonked him on the head with the butt of his sword, knocking him out too. Turning back to the mass of downed marines, he called out, "Anyone else wanna fight?" A few rose up and looked around. They huddled together for a moment before tossing their weapons into the air. "We're free. Captain Morgan has been defeated." The 4 heroes, Kobe included, now sat at a table, gorging themselves on food prepared by Rika's mom. Zoro was the first to tap out. "Woo. I'm stuffed." Looking at his new crewmates, he realized they were still chowing down. "How the hell can the 2 of you eat so much?" "I haven't eaten in over a week." Both shrugged, figuring that their dietary habits were normal. "Thanks, Garp." Recognizing they might eat their host out of house and home, the 2 finally stopped, with Luffy snagging the last slab of meat before Yamato could get her hands on it. He laughed when she growled. "Anyways, where's the rest of the crew?" Zoro asked. "You're looking at it. Me and Yamato are the only members before you." "Great," Zoro grumbled, putting his face into his hand. For the second time in so many hours, he wondered just what he got himself into. "Shishishi, it'll be fine, Zoro." "Yeah." Yamato agreed happily. "We're looking out for strong people, so we'll be fine. Just remember though, I'm the first mate and the strongest." "Second strongest." Luffy corrected. "And just cause you're first mate doesn't mean you can boss anyone around." "I'm the captain." "Humph," Yamato grumbled. "Just cause you won our last fight doesn't mean I'm not stronger." "Yeah, it does. Whoever wins last is the current strongest. I don't make the rules." "Shishishi. Guess we'll need to settle things then at some point." "That's so," Luffy retorted, grinning widely. The 2 always pushed each other, and their monster strength and resolve would only keep pushing them forwards. "Anyways," Zoro cut in, "what now, Luffy?" "We're off to find a navigator. And a musician. Every crew needs a musician." Yamato nodded in agreement. From the stories she'd heard of other crews, this was critical business. Zoro just sighed again, before sporting a smirk. These 2 may have been morons, but their lightheartedness and joy were infectious. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad, right? "What's your plan now, Kobe? Gonna join the Marines still?" Zoro asked. They had spoken for some time while chowing down and had gotten to know one another. "Yeah, once you guys leave I'll head to the base." "You sure that's a good idea? These guys have strong connections and may know you served as a cabin boy for a wanted pirate." "That's true, but I..." Just then, a group of marines came knocking. "Excuse me," the one in front began. "You lot are pirates, correct?" "Yep." Luffy replied cheerily. "On behalf of Shell's Town, we thank you for your service." They saluted the table. The lead marine coughed into his hand awkwardly before he continued. "Unfortunately, we must ask you to leave. We won't be reporting this to HQ, but as Marines we must do our duty." "That's not fair." One customer called out. "These guys saved us from Morgan." "Yeah." Rika exclaimed. "They're good guys." "Be that as it may, they are still criminals. We cannot allow them to stay in town." "No problem." Luffy stood now, motioning for the other 2 to follow. "We'll leave now." As they began their leave, the marine noticed Kobe had not gotten up. "Isn't he part of your crew as well?" Luffy turned back. "Him? Nah, he wants to be a marine though." One of the marines loudly whispered to the commanding officer, "Sir, can we trust this kid? There's been reports of pirates having men sneak into the navy as spies." Kobe looked at them horrified. He glanced towards Luffy, who blankly looked back before he smiled. Another idea seemed to form in that smooth brain of his. "Oh yeah. He's a total weakling. This guy was serving under that fat hag Alvida or something," and before he could continue, Kobe had rushed forwards and punched him with all his might. Eyes now covered by his straw hat, Luffy smirked. His dig worked. He grabbed Kobe by the collar and brought him down, laying punches on his unprotected face. Not hard though, at least not as hard as they should have been. Enough. The Marine in charge announced. I see now that he's not affiliated with you. Now get out of here before you cause more trouble. The crew simply turned away once again, heading back towards the port. Behind them they heard Kobe reiterate, please sir, let me join the Marines. Arriving unbidden, they began packing up some boxes. A few locals provided food as thanks for their actions, which was happily accepted by the trio. They'd need the grub before they reached their next island. After finishing up, Zoro pulled the anchor, and the three began to set sail, off again into the unknown. A shrill yell from the island turned their attention. Luffy? Kobe screamed. I'll never forget you. Thank you for everything. He saluted the three. Sure, that's a good idea, Kobe. Marines shouldn't be saluting pirates, Zoro replied. A small squadron of Marines made their way to the port, lining up with Kobe. They all saluted as well, in thanks to the actions taken by this small pirate crew. Luffy just smiled and waved as they drew further and further away. Now they just needed to find a navigator. And as fate would have it, they would find the best. The crew of the future Pirate King slowly meandered along in their tiny boat. They had run out of food yesterday evening, which meant 3 full crates lasted less than 48 hours. The boat barely had enough room for the 3, given 2 were full-grown adults, and 1 was a nearly 9-foot-tall Demononi princess. Zoro still didn't really understand what she was, but figured it didn't matter much. His new captain trusted her fully, so why shouldn't he? That title would take some getting used to. Zoro was not the type to serve anyone. The journey had started simple. Their first day on the open ocean, the 3 began told stories of their pasts. Luffy and Yamato talked about where they grew up and the years they spent together. They joked about their fights, the monsters they ate, and even how they started their little counting contest to see who was the strongest. Their last fight took nearly 2 whole days, with Luffy barely coming out on top. Zoro told them about his training and travels so far. How he left his village in search of one man and couldn't find his way home, so he began collecting bounties for money. He had even found himself a couple stray followers, though he hadn't seen them in some time. He had also explained that he wanted to be the greatest swordsman ever since he was a child, and that fully solidified after meeting his childhood friend Kuina. She was his first rival, and at the dojo he trained at, she was the only one who could best him in single combat. Even full-grown adults had stood no match for his revered two-sword style, and yet any time he faced her, day or night, he could not win. So he kept training, and grew stronger and stronger. And yet he lost again and again, until the record was 2000. Anger had flared in the boy, and in a fit of rage, he challenged his longtime rival to a duel with real blades. And she defeated him, marking it 2001 times. Afterwards, she had revealed to him her own plight, that she wouldn't be stronger than him forever, simply because she was a girl. Yamato grew angry at this, just as a young Zoro did, but Luffy calmed her down. Zoro explained that after they had spoken, they had formed a pact that one of them would be the greatest swordsman in the world. Yet tragically, she died the next day in an unexplained incident. But her death resonated with him, reminding him that even the toughest people he knew could die. Luffy and Yamato both picked up on his meaning and silently vowed to be more careful around stairs. Yamato gave him the shortened, yet still important, story of her childhood pre-East Blue. Who her father was, what he had done to her in Wano, and how she ended up being picked up by a marine ship in the middle of the ocean, led by Luffy's marine grandpa. Zoro was now even more at a loss to just how lucky and powerful she was or could be. He realized that he had better train harder, refusing to be less than the second strongest on this crew. Maybe when they had some space he'd challenge her to a spar to see their current gap in strength. Strangely, for whatever reason, even though they were now a full-blown crew and would probably say everything about themselves, no one brought up Ace. Or that Luffy's grandpa was Garp. Maybe they forgot. The second day was a little more of the same, but after some time they kinda just floated, making small talk about whatever came up. Weather, thoughts on their journey and the future, how they trained in their spare time. They were all becoming much more comfortable together as a team. During this time, Zoro started to really pick up on the other two's dynamic. They may have argued all the time, but they seemed to always know what the other was thinking, to a degree. And they always seemed to gravitate to each other, even when asleep. Zoro noted this during his first watch alone, but decided this wasn't important. Their relationship in his head could be best summed up that they were like brother and sister. Probably due to their near 10 years of history together. Also, they were in a pain in the ass. They easily riled one another up, and although their bickering never seemed serious, their close proximity meant it was going to keep happening. Zoro silently prayed to whatever gods existed in the world that they would find a bigger ship soon. Individually, Zoro found he actually liked them both in their own weird ways. Luffy, for his grand ambitions, was a simple guy who loved to eat and be happy. When he wasn't causing a fuss or annoying the other two, he was looking outwards to the seas ahead of them, always on the lookout for a new adventure. Zoro knew he couldn't follow anybody, and he expected that this rubber man was not just somebody to be taken lightly. And his itch for more made Zoro just a little more excited about their futures, though he'd never verbalized this. Yamato was also an interesting character. She was tough as nails, quick to respond in anger, and seemed to smile almost as much as Luffy, though maybe not as expressive as him. From her short story alone, Zoro could tell she was much more impacted by her time in Wano than she let on, just by her tone. She must have been lonely, and from the way the two explained their meeting, Luffy's split-second decision must have been one of the greatest moments in her life. So she laughed hard, fought hard, and experienced life to the fullest just like their captain did, because she really was that happy. Though, Zoro may have been thinking too hard on this, so he simply stopped thinking. He decided to leave his train of thought on this alone for now, and just watch and listen. Yamato's conclusion about Zoro was that he was a blockhead, just like their captain. He always seemed to try and seem smart, but he was just as dumb as the two of them. He also tried to pretend he was not paying attention, but she knew he was watching and listening, even with his eyes closed, lounging back. She instantly knew Zoro would be fiercely protective of them from his demeanor and the look in his eyes, even if he wouldn't admit it, and her sixth sense told her that he was extremely powerful. Maybe he was destined to become as great as he dreamed. She decided that she liked him a lot and was excited to see just how far he could go. And she would be there, just like Luffy and the rest of their future Nakama, cheering the man on. She was glad he was their first Nakama, because when the going inevitably gets tough, he would definitely be the most reliable one they would know. Luffy liked Zoro. He seemed really strong and cool. That's about the extent he would think about his newest Nakama on the matter. Third day began much the same, though once Luffy began whining about food, he received a couple of smacks, one from each person. Face now bruised and cheek puffed out, Luffy fell backwards and laid quietly for once. That is, until he spotted a bird slowly gliding almost a mile above them. "Hey, a bird," Luffy exclaimed. "I'm gonna catch it and eat it. I'm so hungry." Stretching his arm out, he grabbed the top of their miniature mast, intent on slingshotting himself up. "Let me help," Yamato excitedly said, standing. She wound up and smashed Luffy in the butt as he got prepared, calling out her move, dubbed Thunderclap Bagua, a weaker version than her father's. Her swing launched him upwards, with Luffy yelling and screaming about how he was gonna kick her ass once he landed. "You sure like hitting him," Zoro stated, using a hand to block the sun while staring up at the dot that was their captain. "He's fun to hit, cause he always bounces back," she giggled. The two had been doing this back and forth for years, and no matter how many times she smacked him, he always came back cheekily and never seemed to stay mad. Must have been cause they established this right off the bat, no pun intended. And in all their years together, even after the mediator of their fights, Ace, left, the two never seemed to have a real verbal fight over this, or anything else for that matter. They just connected. She smiled. Above them, Luffy slammed into the bird's beak, head first. Both Yamato and Zoro expected this to knock it out of the sky, but it didn't seem to react. In fact, it almost looked like Luffy was stuck. Eyes he called down. "I think I'm stuck," he stated, astutely. The bird continued to fly on, uncaring of its new guest currently held in its jaw. "That idiot," Zoro roared, grabbing two paddles from below his seat. "Grab the other two, Yamato, we gotta chase that moron before we lose sight. You can't tell me what to do," Yamato shouted, but still reached for the spare paddles. "I'm the first mate." Zoro grunted at her, ignoring her plight, and continued paddling as fast as possible. Yamato followed suit, trying to keep an equal row speed so they wouldn't capsize. In the distance, a trio of men seemed to be floating mindlessly in the open ocean. They must have noticed the boat and began to yell out. "Hey! Stop! We need help," one cried. "I can't stop now, just hop in," Zoro called back. "What?" the three shrieked. Zoro and Yamato continued rowing at immense speeds, and the three pirates barely had enough reactions to grab a hold and hoist themselves up. The new guests began breathing heavily, staring downwards, until they caught their breath. The one in the front made to draw his sword, as did his two compatriots, and they looked up. "Thanks for the pickup," now dropped the paddles and, what the hell? They realized two things in that moment. 1. A giant 9-foot-tall woman was glaring at them while rowing rapidly, club strapped to her back. And 2. The other individual was currently armed with 3 swords, meaning he could only be one person. Rather than even bothering to try anything, the three looked at one another, nodded, and leapt right back out into the ocean. Probably for the best. They'd maybe find another boat passing by. "What was that about?" Zoro grunted. His head was turned still, trying to keep his eyes on the giant bird. "No idea." "Doesn't matter, we gotta catch up with our moron captain," Yamato retorted. She swore to herself if the idiot fell over the ocean and drowned, she'd kill him. He wasn't allowed to die. Meanwhile, about a mile over the ocean, Luffy looked down, staring blankly, picking his nose. At some point or another, maybe they'd get over an island and he could just fall. Benefits of being rubber. No worries over these normally dangerous activities. As fate would have it, an island did appear, and the bird quickly drew nearer to the coast. Luffy began to struggle about, attempting to free his head. Something must have worked, and as they reached said coast, Luffy fully dislodged himself and, using the bird's massive beak as a ledge, launched himself downwards like a rocket. Hey. That might be a good name for a move. He'd have to try it later. At his current speed, he'd have no ability to react before landing, so he let fate dictate wherever that may be. This just so happened to be right onto a group of thugs who in a million years would not have anticipated a rubber boy to fall from the sky on their heads. The massive dust cloud that formed from Luffy's landing quickly dissipated, and after extracting himself from a hole, he came face to face once again with that orange-haired girl, currently with her mouth agape in confusion. "Who are you? How are you alive?" she exclaimed, seeing him completely unhurt from the fall. Luffy simply brushed himself off and looked her up and down, confused. "Didn't I tell you already? I'm Luffy." Realization dawned on the girl, recognizing him from that Alvida incident, but before she could respond, the goons that had been chasing her had finally started getting up. Rather than beg for help, she simply said, "Thanks for the assist, boss. I'll let you handle this one." She quickly scampered off out of sight, and Luffy heard noise behind him. "So, you're the girl's boss, huh? Guess we should kill you then." Luffy turned and stared at them, realized they were a group of weak-looking pirates, and quickly beat the crap out of them. "No use talking to guys like that. Sweet. Now it's 1611. I should beat up more of these guys so Yamato never catches up." Shishy. "So, who really are you?" A girl's voice called from above. It was that same orange-haired girl who left him to fight. "Are you dumb? I already told you, I'm Luffy. Monkey D. Luffy." She leapt down from the roof and landed in front of him. "Well, Luffy, you seem pretty tough. You beat those pirates like it was nothing." "Those guys?" Luffy pointed over his shoulder. "They seem pretty weak to me. Now, are gonna tell me your name finally?" "The name's Nami." Nami pointed to herself, smiling. "I'm a thief and a navigator." She shook a map in front of, showing her newly acquired loot. "This here is a map to get to the Grand Line. I'm gonna use it to help me find more dumb pirates and rob 'em blind." "The navigator? Awesome. I need one of those." "Really? Wanna team up?" Nami was now smiling widely, recognizing she had a strong person who could do her bidding. "Sure. Welcome to the crew." Luffy happily replied, extending his hand. Nami's smile instantly disappeared and she smacked his hand away. What do you mean crew?" she asked, a hint of aggravation creeping into her voice. "I'm a pirate shishy. My crew is on the way, they'll be so excited to meet you. I got this one guy, his name is..." Nami cut him off. "Nope. Never mind. I'm not teaming up with pirates, I hate them. I only like money and mycons." The glare she threw his way would have leveled most people, but Luffy didn't seem to mind. "You hate pirates? Why?" Nami hesitated for a moment before she said, "They took someone important from me." Luffy's eyes widened just a little bit more. "Who were they?" "The pirates and the person." The look of concern on his face actually seemed legitimate. Nami's expression softened. The guy in front of her did not give her the airs of the evil and conniving pirates she knew. But he was a pirate and could become just like those she hated. She internally put some walls back up just to make sure she gave herself some emotional protection. "Does it matter?" she asked quietly. She looked him in the eyes and said, "Look, you don't seem too awful, maybe we can help each other out, just for now. There's a pirate on this island I'm trying to rob and I could use some assistance. I'm trying to collect 100 million berries to buy a certain island and I know these pirates got a ton stashed." She smiled slyly. "I'll even split the loot, 70-30. Luffy made to reply, but his stomach spoke first. A loud grumble echoed and he grabbed at it, slumping down. "I'm hungry. Can I help after I eat something?" Nami blinked. She didn't expect him to comply so easily. "Sure. Let's see." She looked around and realized that given the town was currently abandoned, she could probably break in somewhere. "Follow me, I'll make you something as thanks for earlier." "Sweet. I hope you make me twice the food since I saved you twice." He replied cheekily. Yeah, fine. But you better not mess up my plan." Meanwhile, Zoro and Yamato could finally see land in the distance. "You think he landed there?" Zoro asked, continuing to row. "If I know Luffy, then yeah. But I swear, if he's eating without us, I'm sending him through a building," Yamato replied, gritting her teeth. Luffy was eating. Quite a bit. Possibly enough for 3. Something in the air told him he would get punished for this, but he wasn't sure why. Nami and him had raided a couple fridges after he told her it had been a full day since he ate. She felt kinda bad and figured she'd at least help him prep some food. At no point did she expect this human vacuum to consume 3 houses worth of food, but here they were. A good 10 minutes later, he sat back in his seat at the table and relaxed. Nami sat adjacent to him, looking the boy over. How he could eat that much and not be bloated or dead was beyond her, and she was kinda jealous. Who wouldn't want to be able to eat anything in any amount and still be fit and thin? So Luffy, are you finally ready for my plan? Sure. I ate enough for now, I'm good. Luffy took his hat off and started spinning it on his finger mindlessly. So what are we doing? Well, there's a ton of those pirates all at the center of town at a bar. Their leader is a man known as Buggy the Clown. He's a bastard that attacks villages and raids all sorts of small islands. Nami looked at Luffy, waiting for some kind of hint he was paying attention, but he was still spinning his stupid hat, looking off into space. Would you cut that out? This is serious. Nami yelled, grabbing his hat and tossing it over her shoulder. Hey. Don't touch my special hat. It's my treasure. Luffy glared at her and moved to grab it. The look he gave was the most serious she had seen him yet, and she felt kind of bad. Luffy reached down, picked and dusted his straw hat off, and placed it firmly on his head. He made his way back to the table before plopping down and crossing his arms. Sorry, Nami began, I didn't realize it meant that much to you. Why is it so important? She watched him slip the hat back off and stare at it intently, as though it held all the answers in the world. My friend Shanks gave it to me. He made me promise him that I wouldn't give it back until I was a great pirate. So I'm holding on to it for now, until the day we meet once again as equals. The seriousness in his tone told more than just the statement. Nami realized just how deep this boy's ambitions went and that he would do anything to reach them, regardless of how tough the road may be. He dropped it back on his head and looked at her again, motioning for Nami to continue. Anyways, Nami started again. This guy means business. But he has something I need, so I gotta trick him. That's where you come in. Ever been tied up before? Zoro and Yamato finally made landfall and tied the small boat up next to another slightly larger vessel with a pirate mark on the sail. Looking around, they quickly noticed that no one seemed to be around. And a massive ship peeked around a corner of a nearby building with a circus elephant masthead partially seen. This seems odd, don't you think? Zoro asked. Yamato nodded before taking a deep breath in. For what it's worth, his own has increased senses and wolves have a strong sense of smell. I smell Luffy, he's with someone else who smells of Mycons. And wait a minute. I smell food. On him. That bastard did eat without us. I'm gonna kick his ass. Yamato made to run off before Zoro grabbed the hem of her tunic. Hold on there, monster girl, Zoro said, causing the girl to pout. If he's with someone, that probably means that he's off to do something stupid and might need help. We need to get to the bottom of this before we walk into a trap. This quiet town and that ship means there are pirates, and pirates mean fights, Zoro said, pointing to said ship. But Zoro, Yamato complained. It's not fire. I'm hungry too. I gotta eat something. Didn't you say samurai don't get hungry while we were sailing? Yamato stopped and held her thumb and index finger to her face for a moment, contemplating the question before coming to her conclusion. Well, I'm not actually a samurai yet, bye. Yamato pulled herself loose and raced off to who knows where. Either to find grub or beat their moron captain. Maybe both. Zoro sighed and made his way into town. His mastery of directions meant he knew he'd find Luffy immediately, even without Yamato's senses. Definitely. He just needed to go right. They were to the left. Luffy and Nami walked their way towards the bar in the center of town. Well, to be fair, it was more like Nami was walking Luffy. The boy was currently tied up, with ropes wrapped to and fro around his torso in a tight set of knots. Nami had concocted this plan, though Luffy wasn't sure why. He told her he could kick all their asses himself, but she wasn't sure about that. Buggy was a big-time pirate in these parts, and although she had seen a little of what Luffy had accomplished, and even a little of what his devil fruit could do, she didn't want to take any chances. The plan was to convince Buggy that she was giving her boss up so she could get her hands on his treasure when his guard was down. After, she'd help free Luffy, and they'd get the hell out of there. As they approached the bar, a lookout called out from the roof. Captain Buggy. It's that girl. She's returned with someone else. The host of circus-themed pirates quickly exited the bar, encircling the two to provide no rude escape, growling and grumbling as they did so. What should we do, Captain? One man asked. Let's kill him and be done with it. Another called out. Stand down everyone, a voice called out from within the bar. Those near the doorway made way, and a new man appeared. He was wearing traditional pirate garb mixed in with a clown theme. An orange captain's jacket laid on his back, and his head was adorned by a pirate cap of the same color. His face bore two intersecting bones. His most distinguishing feature, however, was the bright red nose. So girly, why have you come back to us? And why shouldn't I kill you, right where you stand? Jai ha 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 ha. He laughed. Permission to come aboard, Captain. Nami declared. I've had some creative differences with my bonehead boss here and have decided to give him up to you. please let me join your crew. She even held out the sea chart she had stolen as a peace offering. What? The crowd erupted. Yells and calls were given out, questioning Nami, as well as declaring her an enemy that could not be trusted. Silence, you fools. Buggy shouted out, silencing his men. Turning back to Nami, he said, well, this does sound interesting. Why not? Welcome aboard. Men. Let's celebrate. His men looked about for a moment before cheering loudly, excited at the prospect of another party. Nami smirked to herself. Yes. She thought. Now to get my hands on his treasure, get that chart back, and get the hell out of here. I'll play cool first, and the second he lets his guard down, I'll be out of here. The couple pirates slowly made their ways forwards, hoisting a very large iron and concrete cage. They dropped it unceremoniously next to Nami, took the rope and chart from her hands, and pushed Luffy in. Somehow, the rubber boy had not said a word this whole time and was spacing out without a care in the world. That is, until the celebration began. Once the food and drink came out, Luffy's stomach started growling once again. The group was feasting and dining, with various circus acts occurring and cheery music to encapsulate the moment. The party was taking place on top of the bar, with tables set up and food and booze lined every which way. Nami was taking the seat next to Buggy, giggling while sipping drink after drink. The grog was weak and she kept an eye on her pace to keep her wits about her. She got up and made her way over to Luffy. How you doing, boss? She mocked lightly. Let me out of here. I'm hungry. Luffy replied, frowning and annoyed. She tossed him a slab of meat from a nearby table and he happily scarfed it down. Okay, you're not that bad. You can join my crew for sure. He smiled. I would never join pirates. Nami nearly yelled, almost loud enough for the others to hear. Dropping her tone, she whispered, don't you realize the situation you're in? They're gonna plan to sell or even kill you. Luffy frowned at that. But, if my plan works, maybe I'll let you out of there. You don't seem so bad. So then why don't you let me go now? Just then, Buggy made his presence known. How are you doing, kid? Still mad your partner here ditched you, huh? Jai ha ha ha. Nah, she's just dumb. We'll be fine and sail together after this. Jai ha ha ha. Buggy laughed. You really are a flashy moron. And do you know what happens to flashy morons who try to steal my treasure? You let them go? Luffy asked, cheekily. That's right, I'm gonna let you. What are you, stupid? I'm gonna kill you. Suddenly, it appeared that an idea came to Buggy. Men. I have just come up with the most flashy idea. Bring out the cannon. And, load one special Buggy ball. Jai ha ha ha. Nami put down her glass and looked on as a few of Buggy's men wheeled over a massive cannon. Another scampered over, carrying a red cannonball with a clown face on it, matching Buggy's pirate mark. What's going on? Nami asked, concern starting to enter her voice. Watch and be amazed, Buggy said simply. Now men, fire the Buggy ball. Let's demonstrate the power of real pirates. The cannoneer lit the fuse, and the crowd watched in anticipation. Even Luffy looked on, while quietly reaching his hand behind his back as far as it could go to grab some meat. He unfortunately missed, and his arm swung back and knocked him over. As the comically long fuse reached the base of the cannon, the smiles on the crew's face grew all the larger until finally, the blast rocked the cannon backwards and decimated a street's worth of buildings. It almost seemed like half the town laid in ruins. Diahahaha. We'll destroy whole villages with just a few of these. Buggy laughed manically. Now Nami, it's your turn. What, me? Nami asked, terrified. Yes. I want you to blow up your old boss. Prove to me that you're loyal. Another pirate quickly appeared and reloaded the cannon. Buggy watched on, snorting and laughing to himself as a box of matches was handed to Nami, excited at the prospect of more violence. Can't we go back and keep the party going? We were having so much fun. Nami argued, feebly. This is what I find fun, Nami. He glared at her, harshly. Do it. Nami looked helplessly to Luffy. He looked at her without a care in the world. Her hands shook and sweat was visible on her face. She never wanted to stoop to this level, but what was she supposed to do? Kill this kid. He saved her life twice. Luffy noticed her demeanor and laughed before looking down. This is what happens when you go against pirates with weak resolve, Nami, Luffy said sternly, hat shielding his eyes. Weak resolve? Nami asked, with some acid in her voice. You mean no resolve to kill someone like it's nothing? Is that what it means to be a pirate? Her tone was icy, but Luffy could tell there was fear in her voice too. No, Luffy replied, some warmth returning to calm her. It means being prepared to risk your life. The jester-looking pirate seemed to have enough of this exchange and walked towards her. What's the matter, girlie? Don't know how to fire a cannon? He grabbed the matchbook from her hand and quickly lit one, intent on lighting the fuse. Both Nami's and Luffy's eyes widened, but for two different reasons. Luffy saw the white blaze move before anyone else. As Nami reached under her skirt to grab her hidden three-piece staff, the man disappeared in a flash. A hole was in his place, and massive form was now standing next to Nami. Nearly every pirate stared eyes wide and mouths agape at the sight. A massive woman had appeared, hoisting a club and sporting an extremely aggravated look on her face. "Captain," she stated. "Permission to kick your ass after I kick everyone else's." "Shishy," Luffy laughed. "Sure. But get me out and save some for me." He grinned. Meanwhile, Zoro was on the move. That blast from the cannon came within a few feet of his current position, and if Zoro was a gambling man, he'd bet Luffy was wherever it came from. That idiot, he'd better not have gotten himself killed. Zoro shouted, running towards the noise coming from where it had been shot from. Surprisingly, he actually went in the right direction this time. "Say Luffy," Yamato asked, ignoring the yells of fear around them. "Do you remember what I told you before we went on our adventure? About how if one of us ate without the other, the one who didn't eat gets to beat the other?" Luffy audibly gulped. Of course I do. "So, Captain, was the food worth it?" "Come on, Yamato," he nervously replied. "Now's not the time. Get me out of here and we can settle this after." "Yeah?" Nami chimed in, just as confused at the situation as everyone else. "What the hell even is she?" Nami wondered. "We gotta run, these guys aren't a joke." And, it's the captain's orders." Yamato looked around, blinked once, twice, and sighed. "Ian. These guys don't look like much, but I guess I'll help him out." She turned to Nami and gave her a smirk, "And I guess I do need to listen to our captain, right?" She leapt towards the cage and called out "Thunderclap Bagua," smashing it to pieces. "What do you mean our captain?" Nami asked, irritated. "I never agreed to join his crew, he was just helping me out." Sure, Yamato laughed. "I always have an idea of how the rubber idiot thinks. And he's already decided you'd be in the crew." That little speech proved it. He stole it right from his hero, right Luffy? Shishy, yeah, Luffy replied as he stood up, Yamato assisting with the rope around him. "She's a navigator, and she says she's the best." "A navigator? Awesome. Now we can actually go places." Yamato cheered happily. The two laughed while Luffy was released, and Nami looked on, almost amused. "These two morons don't have a care in the world," she thought. And yet, she couldn't help but feel gravitated towards their stupidity. Finally, the shoe dropped and the Buggy pirates regained their composure, albeit still scared. "What do we do, Captain?" one man wailed. "She smashed that cage like it was nothing." "Yeah, Captain. That monster is scary." "Hey." Yamato and Luffy called out loudly. "I'm not a monster." Yamato shot back. "Yeah?" Luffy defended. "She's a diving wolf." "Divine wolf, you moron." Yamato snapped at him, whacking him on the back of the head. "And that's just my devil fruit. I'm not even in that form." "Are you two done with your little farce?" Buggy asked, annoyed. "I don't care who you two think you are, I am Buggy the Clown. Terror of the East Blue. And I do not fear upstarts trying to pick a fight. Men. Prepare for battle." "Aye." His men called back, drawing weapons and blades from anywhere they could find them. "Moji. Kabaji. Let's show them the power of the Buggy pirates." A loud booming was heard as a massive lion made its appearance. It was ridden by a strange individual who appeared to be wearing an animal costume. Or at least part of one. Next to him wheeled a man with a half-shaven head, scarf around his neck, riding a unicycle and wielding a generic cutlass. Seeing the pair, Luffy and Yamato laughed hard. This even drew Nami to giggles, and she wasn't even sure why. She was certain they'd all die right now. "Do you have 4 ears?" Luffy asked the lion rider, finally calming down. The man had a furious expression in his face. "This is my hair, you ingrate. And for that, I'll kill you." The lion lurched forwards, sprinting headlong at the three. "Nobody mocks the Buggy pirates and lives." The unicyclist called out, charging as well, sword pointed downwards in a jousting maneuver. Luffy and Yamato couldn't not laugh again, and the red-faced Moji prepared his whip, excited to kill these brats. Just before they drew near, 2 flashes occurred. Yamato was no longer at Luffy's side. She was airborne, crushing the head of the lion as it leapt and sending the pair flying. The other was green, and his sword blocked the racing cyclist. Zoro was now on the scene, and he was annoyed. "Damn it, Luffy, what did you get us into now?" he asked. "Hi, Zoro." "Don't know," Luffy responded simply. "Got us a navigator though," he said, pointing to Nami. The girl didn't even attempt to correct him, resigned at that point to just accept what he said for now. She was moreso confused by the new member. Wait, did he just say Zoro? Great. At least that's one less thing to worry about. Looking at the opponent in front of him that he was currently holding with one sword, he smirked. "Need me to get rid of this guy?" "Sure. You must be Urano Zoro," the unicyclist declared. "It'll be an honor to kill you." The man wheeled backwards and blew a stream of fire. Zoro dodged and came at him, not even nothing to pull out his remaining blades. "I wish I could say the same, but a chump like you ain't worth a spit." Meanwhile, Yamato had made her way back to the group. "That was boring. Can I beat those other guys too? She pointed at the rest of Buggy's crew, who stood speechless at the sight. Shishi, not if I do first. Luffy yelled, rushing forwards happily. Hey. Yamato responded. That's not fair, you got a head start. 1612 by the way. He called over his shoulder. Gum Gatling. He called, fists flying rapidly in all directions, striking countless goons. Divine Serpent. Yamato yelled, swinging her club in the direction of more pirates. The air blast itself sent a ton flying, and any it connected with may as well have been sent to the moon. Nami watched in awe as all of this went down. She nearly forgot about the treasure, just watching and impressed at the view in front of her. Someone tried to sneak up on her, knife drawn, but his stealth lacked any class, and she quickly struck him down with her bow staff, unmoved. A couple more made their way at her, but she held her own. The girl alone wouldn't survive in these waters if she couldn't fight. Realizing that she was no longer needed though, she exited stage left and disappeared, with the intent of finding Buggy's treasure and recovering the sea chart. Meanwhile, the clown in question was getting red in the face, almost to the color of his nose. His first mate was dispatched in a moment, and his chief of staff was not faring much better. He'd have to get involved now, and he knew just the way. A knife appeared between his fingers, and he silently sent his hand out. None of Luffy's group saw it coming until a yell was shouted out. The knife struck true in Zoro's side, and he went down. He barely had time to block a swipe from Kabaji and tumbled off, holding his wound. Diahahaha. Buggy laughed. That's what you get when you mess with us. Now Kabaji. Finish him off. The Unisicalist was sweating profusely, and none of his tricks seemed to work, but seeing the state Zoro was in reinvigorated his energy. Time for you to die, pirate hunter. Zoro. Luffy and Yamato called out. Luffy reached forwards, intent on pulling him away, but Zoro knocked his hand back and rolled out of Kabaji's sword path. Zoro. Luffy asked. If you think that I'd even remotely lose to a lackey like this, I should just kill you too, Zoro called back. I already told you, I'm to be the world's greatest swordsman. Luffy smiled his trademark grin. Shishi. You're right, sorry. Kick his ass, Zoro. Are you calling me a lackey? Kabaji yelled out. I'll show you my true sword prowess. Now die. He charged once again, no style or skill to his movement, just dead set on stabbing the swordsman. Zoro had removed his two other swords from his scabbards finally. One was placed in his mouth, the other two held upside down. Oni. Die. Kabaji yelled, now ride upon the green-haired man. Jiri. The slice was so fast, no one could process it. Kabaji stopped for a moment before blood exploded from his chest. He fell backwards, calling out weakly, how could the Buggy pirates lose to thieves? We're pirates, Zoro responded simply. He placed his blades back in their proper place and made his way to Luffy and Yamato. That was annoying, he complained, holding the hole in his side. You must suck, Zoro, Luffy and I haven't gotten touched yet. Yamato laughed, pointing to his wound playfully. Guess you better restart your training. A tick appeared on Zoro's forehead. And where were you? Fighting useless goons and a lion. Big whoop. Once we finish here, we're gonna settle this. Yamato argued, staring him down. Zoro nodded, doing the same. And then they laughed. The two had now formed an unspoken agreement that one of them would be the real number 2 in the pecking order. Shishi, you guys are dumb, Luffy laughed. By the way, I'm winning, Yamato. Score is 25-20. I got dibs on Big Nose too. Yamato growled, but looked away. She'd give him this, but the next captain she was certain she'd get. You've gone and really flashily pissed me off. Buggy yelled. Now I'll kill all 3 of you. Starting with that rubber bastard in the straw hat. That hat really pisses me off. It reminds me of that damn Redeed who ruined my life. Shanks? Luffy asked, confused. You know Shanks? I don't know, maybe I do, maybe I don't, Buggy shot back. All tension evaporated. That's stupid, either you do or you don't, Luffy replied mildly. Zoro and Yamato nodded their agreement. Shut up. I'll kill you, then enter the Grand Line and kill that cheeky bastard too. You know where Shanks is? Buggy smirked. You'll have to beat me in order to find out. Okay. Luffy responded smiling, rushing forwards into the fray. Nami had collected a massive bag of treasure and was making her way through the back streets of town. This must be 10 million berries right here. Nami laughed to herself. She had found Buggy's stash and tricked the guard to easily swoop the pirates' loot along with the chart. Almost there, just a few million berries to go, and I'll finally be at 100 million. As she walked, she looked up towards the sky. And then maybe I'll finally be free, Bellamere. The crashing sound was heard a street over. Nami jumped at the sound, and it drew her out of her momentary monologue. Peering around a corner, what she saw she could honestly say shocked her. Currently, the supposedly revered Captain Buggy was hunched over, holding his gut and panting heavily. Luffy's arm was reeling backwards to his body, snapping back into form. You stupid brat. Buggy yelled angrily after catching his breath. You really think you have what it takes to beat me? Of course I do. I'm gonna be king of the pirates. King of the pirates, Buggy screamed, dumbfounded. If you're the pirate king, then I'm God. He spat a dribble of blood. Now try this on for size, chop chop cannon. He launched his fist forwards, knives between his fingers. Luffy caught it easily, holding them in place. Buggy slyly smirked. Separate. His hand split into pieces, continuing forwards between Luffy's fingers. The slices just left some small slashes in Luffy's cheeks, but knocked his straw hat cleanly of his head, taking a small chunk with it. Luffy's eyes darkened at that. Uh-oh, Yamato warned. This won't be good. Zoro looked at her, and realization dawned on his face. Their captain was pissed. You bastard. You nicked my hat. Nobody touches my treasure. I am gonna kick your ass. Die ha 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 ha. That piece of trash is your treasure. Well then, Buggy stared him down. You should take better care of it. His hand suddenly swooped in from behind, blades cleanly slicing through the hat's material and leaving holes in the top. Buggy's hand returned to him, hat on the top, and he ripped it off. I promise to return that to Shanks, you bastard. Luffy screamed, sprinting forwards. This is Shanks, Buggy angrily called out. I knew it looked familiar. He threw it downwards, stomping and spitting on it. Nami saw the look in Luffy's eyes as he rushed forwards, and they said it all. The anger flashed worse than any sea monster she had ever seen. They almost seemed like a certain man's, but just not as ruthless. The boy's look was to beat the snot out of his unlucky enemy, not to brutalize and kill them. Even Yamato realized the situation. The look on her best friend's face was one she hadn't seen in quite some time, and she almost wanted to step in and beat the stupid clown with him. Zoro felt the aura escaping off of her and Luffy and placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. They both knew it was Luffy's fight, whether they wanted to intervene or not. She bit her lip and watched on, unsatisfied. Chop chop, quick escape. Buggy proclaimed, trying to separate to escape danger at the last moment. His arrogance and his abilities got the better of him, and Luffy landed a punch right in his smug face before he could get away. Buggy's head flew one way and slammed against the side of a nearby building, and his body went another. After a moment, Luffy finally seemed to calm down, and he picked his damaged treasure up. You'll never be on the same level as Shanks, Luffy stated. Buggy's body slowly reformed, and the man rubbed his jaw, making sure it wasn't broken. Anger flashed in his eyes at the mere thought of the deed. Says you? That smug loser will get what's coming to him. Never in my life has anyone made me more angry than Shanks. He ruined my dream and stole a great treasure from me. The confusion etched on Luffy's face spoke volumes. This didn't sound like Shanks at all. Buggy continued his monologue. I'll never forgive him. When we were cabin boys, sailing on the Grand Line, our crew got into a battle with another band of pirates. We destroyed them and took all of their loot as a prize. I had even found a map on one of them, marking the location of a hidden treasure somewhere in the Grand Line. We had also come across a devil fruit, something none of us had seen in quite some time. I had planned to take both and leave my crew, but Shanks just had to sneak up on me. I tried to hide the fruit and ended up swallowing it. I even lost the map to the cruel ocean and nearly drowned trying to recover it. Shanks pulled me out, but to this day I'll never forgive him, or anyone who tries to take my treasure. At that moment, he split apart again, and his arms and head rushed straight at Nami, who had thought no one had noticed her hiding. Oh crap. She screamed and started running. Come back here, you filthy thief. No one steals my treasure. Realizing what was happening, Luffy made a quick decision. He wound up his leg and laid a icy kick on the unsuspecting nuts of one Buggy the clown. His body instantly crumpled and his currently floating limbs collapsed, tears in his eyes. Luffy smirked. Your fight is with me, remember? Luffy turned to his crewmates. Zoro, Yamato, make sure nothing happens to Nami. I told her I'd split that treasure with her before we left. Zoro grunted. Yamato gave a thumbs up. Neither expected that they'd need to do anything. Nami ran up to them panting, thanks you guys. You're lifesavers. Zoro and Yamato shrugged. Now the trio watched on for the climax of the fight. Well, it could have been the climax if Luffy was also distracted by protecting Nami had his other members been knocked out. Instead, Buggy now had his full attention. And boy, did Luffy have some anger to get out on him. One walloping later, Buggy was a crumpled mess on his knees. He was panting heavily and was covered from head to toe in bruises and lumps. I'm not sure why you'd hate Shanks so much for saving your life, but whatever, Luffy said. See ya, Buggy. Luffy announced. Luffy sent both of his arms backwards quite a ways. Wait. Screamed Buggy. What are you doing? You can't do this to me. I'm Buggy the clown. I sailed with gum. Luffy's arms shot forwards, full speed. Bazooka. The hit sent Buggy miles away. All they heard was his screams of anguish as he disappeared into the sunset. Luffy removed his straw hat from his head and sighed. This sucks. He ruined my hat. He complained. Nami made her way to him, feeling his sadness at the sight. "Hey Luffy, thanks for helping me today," she smiled. Looking at his hat she asked, "If you want, I can patch that up for you. It's the least I can do." "Really, you can do that?" Luffy exclaimed, light returning to his eyes. "Thanks Nami." She smiled back at him, feeling the excitement now rolling off him in waves. "Alright guys. Time to go, we got us a new crew member," Luffy declared. "I never said I'd join the crew, just team up." Nami replied annoyed, though his laugh was infectious. "Awesome," Yamato exclaimed. "Now we can actually go places on purpose." Zoro grunted. "I don't think we should trust her," he sighed, "but Captain's orders." Yet again. The original trio quickly made their rounds on the tables for food and booze, eating and drinking almost everything left and packing up the scraps. While Luffy had been mid-bite, Yamato clobbered him, leaving him a comically bloody and bruised mess on the ground. Once they were ready, they grouped up again with Nami. Nami picked up her sack of treasure and realizing it was too heavy, quickly split it into 2 smaller bags. "Can someone hold this one?" she asked, holding one bag out. Yamato grabbed it and hoisted it on her back with her sack of grub. "Too weak to carry it all, huh?" she teased. Nami made to reply, but before she could an angry mob led by an old man in wooden armor had appeared. "We heard the commotion. What happened? Where are the pirates?" the man in the front exclaimed. "We kicked their asses," Yamato replied cheerfully. "You did? Who are you people?" the old man asked. "Pirates," Luffy responded happily. "More pirates," the townspeople yelled. "No more of this nonsense. Capture them." The group rushed the small band of pirates, who quickly turned tail and ran, Luffy laughing the whole way. "You idiot," Nami yelled. "Now they think we're bad guys too." "That's fine," Luffy laughed. "This town needs a victory. They chase us off, they feel good. This seems like a good town after all." He continued smiling while they ran. Nami stared at him until she realized what he meant. None of these people had been here, meaning they had been hiding this whole time, probably out of fear. If that was the case, and they were now chasing pirates out, especially the ones that beat Buggy's crew, they might feel just a bit stronger themselves. For being a moron, Luffy was actually right. Nami smiled at this. Maybe he was a good guy through and through. The group reached the docks and jumped aboard the 2 adjacent boats and quickly disembarked, Zoro and Luffy in one, Yamato and Nami in the other. As they set sail, Yamato flipped the bag onto her forearm and sent it flying towards shore, right at the townsfolk. "Rebuild your town," she called happily. "Who told you to do that?" Nami yelled angrily. She punched Yamato on the top of the head, leaving a sizable lump. The Oni teared up comical tears. "Ow. How'd you hurt me?" Shush Yamato, guess she's stronger than you now." Nami leaned across and whacked Luffy now. "Ow," he complained, rubbing a new lump on his head as well. "Would you do that? You got us jazzed out of town, and you're her captain. So I'm blaming you too, meanie," Luffy retorted, sticking his tongue out with all the dignity of a 10-year-old. Nami sighed and leapt from her boat to Luffy and Zoro's, who were aimlessly setting the sail. "Port to starboard," Nami commanded. "Set our bearing that way." She pointed. "Aye aye." The trio responded, preparing to sail onwards. Hopefully to somewhere with food. As the crew sailed into the sunset, Luffy needed to get one last word in. "Hey Yamato, 2720. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support the Please Enter name here for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.